Hey, what's up guys? Back again with another video. So this episode we're going to move on with actually handling the exceptions and using something called try and catch, which are two keywords that we looked at last episode briefly. And yeah, so this will allow our program to not shut down and we can do whatever we want when exceptions are thrown. So they won't be sent to the default handler, meaning that if you remember last episode, if any exceptions are sent to the default handler, the program will shut down and terminate, same thing. But yeah, so the useful thing about not doing what we're about to do is that the Java console will print out everything you need to know about the exceptions when they're thrown, and then you can just fix them, and then restart your program. But since we're cool and we don't want our program to shut down every time we have an error, we can handle these exceptions or errors, whatever you want to call it. And so yeah, that's what we're going to do. So like I said, we're going to be using the try and catch keyword. So yeah, so if we looked at the thing we made last episode, we made a exception by doing something like this. Let's try int Bob equals 500. And then let's do int C equals Bob divided by 0. Okay. And of course, let's try running this. It'll give us an exception because you can't divide something by 0. So yeah, we get the arithmetic exception. Pretty cool. So whenever you think you might throw an exception, what you want to do is surround it by the try keyword within a block of code like this. So let's move it inside of here. So try will just protect it, and it'll look out for exception to happen. So basically, it'll look out for the exception, and if exception is thrown, you would have this here, a catch keyword. Put a parentheses there also. Okay, and so whenever the exception was created, it'll be sent to the catch thingy, and the catch will check to see, and we have to give it a parameter of arithmetic. What was it? Arithmetic exception. That's what it's called, and that's what the parameter is going to be. And give it a name. We can call it E for E, just like it can be E for anything. E for exception, I mean, or it could be E for just whatever you want. So I'm gonna just have it as E. So that's just like a reference you'll see later on. So what that's gonna do again, an exception is thrown, right? And that means an exception is created. So it's gonna be thrown to here, and this is gonna check and see if it's the same type as the one you have here. So if it's the same type as if this was a arithmetic exception, if this was a arithmetic exception, it'll be sent to here, and then this piece of code will run. So let's put something here. We'll put there was an error, and then let's go ahead and set int c to 0. But pay close attention. Why don't we just do without the int here? Because we already declared it, right? But we can't do that. We get an error because if you know a little bit about scope, int was declared inside of a block of code, so that means it can only be accessed inside that block of code. So what we have to do is redeclare. These are two different C's. So what we should do is declare it out here. So let's go ahead and do that. Int C equals, and we'll just have it as nothing, and then we'll get rid of these. Now that makes more sense, right? Because these, if these were both int C, then they would be two different things, but now they're all the same thing. But anyway, so what it's doing is dividing Bob divided by 0, and it throws an exception, then it comes to here and catches it and says, oh, okay, that's the same thing. So then it's going to run this piece of code, and it's going to print out this was an error, and then it's going to set C to equal 0. And yeah, so let's go ahead and run that. Good, it says there was an error. Let's go ahead and add this to the end. Sout C like that. So this will actually run because this is all handled, right? But let's say it's not handled and we just have, we don't have all this catch here, or maybe this parameter type isn't the same as the one that was created here. Then it will be sent to the default handler. If nothing is catching this exception, then it will be sent to the default handler, which, as you know, will terminate the program. So yeah, it all works out, and if it works out, it'll go on to the next piece of code, and everything will be normal, right? So that's pretty cool, right? So that's how that works. But you can also do one more thing. If you, for some reason, you still want to display the error in the console for as the developer can read, just put E in here. Output E, and then it'll say what you need to know. Pretty cool, right? So yeah, that's that. But there's also something else you can do. We can have multiple catch clauses here. They call it clauses, but so we can have multiple thingies here. So let's say again, this is arithmetic expression. We know that because you can't divide anything by 0. So it's going to create one, and it's going to go to here. It's going to say, oh, that works. So it's not even going to come to here because it knows that this one works. and this will fix everything. But let's say this is something else. We're going to be using null pointer exception. Actually, no, we'll use array index out of bounds exception right there. And I'll explain what that is in a second. So obviously these two won't match anymore. So it's going to go on to the next one if there's a next one. And we'll set this one to arithmetic exception. And these can both be E because they're two separate blocks of code, of course. So yeah. So also we have an error here because C is not 0. Let's move this here. Okay, whatever. So remember, let's say we didn't have this here, then this will just be sent to the default handler and it'll terminate the program, because once you have an exception, you have to handle it. It needs to find a catch statement to handle it. So a good thing we have another one for backup, right? That's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and run this, and it'll prove my point that if you have, no matter where you have it, it'll still work as long as you have it here. So good, it works. It tells us it does what we want it to do. And let's output C was set to 0 because of an error. Good, so that's what we want. And then we'll and then we'll go ahead and output the error again. Good, so that works perfectly fine. So let's say that this isn't an arithmetic exception. Let's change this to something else. So let's do let's set this to 1, and then we'll have something else. Let's make an array here. So int cool array, and then it'll have one value. So it has an index of 1, of course, and or it has a total of 1. So let's say we want to change one of these values. So let's say, as we know, there's only one little thingy inside this array, right? So let's say we want to try to change the third one to a number. We can't do that because that doesn't make sense. There's only one in there, and we already initialized it. So let me explain. So let's do cool array, and that's the 0. So that's the first one, of course, because it's 0 based. Let's set it to 10. So now this will be 10, of course, right? But let's say we have this to 3. There is no 3. We never specified there to be more than 1. So that just won't work, and we'll get an array index out of bounds exception. So that's one of the exceptions. So since we created a handler for it, or a catch statement, it should work. Everything should be fine. So yeah, everything was fine. It says there was an error, and then it ran everything inside of here, right? And this one was never run because we don't have that problem anymore. We changed this to 1, okay? But let's change it to back to 0. Let's see if they both run now. And they don't, because you can't run, like every time, if let's say, okay, it's in order, right? Code works in order. So let's say this one's run here and it's handled. That means that anything else it won't work out. So that means what we could do from there is have a nested try statement, but we'll be doing that in a second, don't worry. So anyway, the point is we can have multiple catch statements, right? And then we can handle them basically like that. So, and there's multiple, there's a bunch of exceptions that we have to learn about, but don't worry, I'll be going over that next episode. So about those nested try statements I told you about, so let's try doing that. So we don't even need this one anymore, to be honest, because we're going to nest it in a second. So let's get rid of that. Good. Okay, we'll copy this. Oh, no, copy the wrong thing. Copy that one. And we'll have it in here. So try right there. Then we have catch here. And then we can say array index out of bounds. And we'll set cool array. We'll say there was an exception thrown while trying to set the fourth element. I'm saying fourth element because it's 0 based, of course. So yeah. So let's try running that and see what happens. There was an exception thrown while trying to set the fourth element. Of course, good. Well, that's because, well, it's going here and it's saying try, and it's running this piece of code. So that works. We don't throw any exceptions here, of course, because it's set to 1 currently. So that's fine for now. But then it goes to the next piece of code. Let's go try this one out. And obviously this will throw an exception. So it'll check right here and it'll say, oh, okay, we can catch that now. So no problem. We'll be fine now. and then all this will be canceled out because everything's solved, and then it'll go to here, which is all good. So that's all good, right? So we're pretty much done with that. It's pretty simple. So now what we know, we can handle exceptions, right? We can catch them and handle them. No, we can try them out by, what try does, remember, is just monitoring the code, and then whenever an exception happens within the try block, then it'll try sending it to a catcher if there is a catch statement that matches it. And if it doesn't match it, of course, if it doesn't have one or two catch statements, like let's say this one doesn't match, then it'll be sent to the default handler. But even if this one doesn't match, we can have another catch statement after it. And if that one matches, then we're all good to go and it won't be sent to the default handler and terminated. So hope that all makes sense. Leave a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. If you have any questions, just leave a comment. Join the Discord in the description, and peace.